That concludes the statement, and we now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Fabian Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about lasting powers of attorney, to place duties on banks in respect of lasting powers of attorney, to make provision about the powers of the Office of the Public Guardian to investigate the actions of an attorney, to require the Secretary of State to review the effectiveness of the powers of the Office of the Public Guardian to investigate the actions of an attorney and of its use of those powers, to make provision about the duties of care homes in respect of lasting powers of attorney, to require an attorney to notify the Office of the Public Guardian of the death of a donor, to require the Office of the Public Guardian to take steps to promote the facility to request a search of its registers of powers of attorney, and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, 6 years ago I tabled a 10-minute rule bill entitled Marriage and Civil Partnership Consent. This was the first legislative attempt to stop the practice of predatory marriage, a cruel form of abuse, whereby someone marries an elderly or vulnerable person exclusively for the purpose of gaining access to their estate upon death. In the years since, it's become clear that there are additional ways in which unscrupulous individuals may target the elderly and vulnerable. Today, Madam Deputy Speaker, I ask the House to try and close one of these gaps in procedure that is harming so many. Lasting Power of Attorney, or LPA. The simplification of LPA processes in the last few years was, I believe, short-sighted, and I hope my remarks today will explain why. Madam Deputy Speaker, if I were to describe the instances, all the instances of this abuse that have been shared with me in recent months, I would need far more than my allotted 10 minutes. So, owing to time constraints, therefore, I will share the testimonies of just 4 people who have all consented to be named and none of whom is subject to current legal proceedings. The first is Carolyn Stevens. Her elderly widowed father met with a woman in 2012, and at first Carolyn was pleased that her father had found a new companion, but began to be concerned when the woman started answering her father's phone and, over the next few years, found that Carolyn herself was systematically removed from her father's life. First, her father was taken to a registry office where the woman tried to marry him, but the registrar refused, saying that he did not have the capacity, as he couldn't even answer a basic question such as giving his own home address. And a week later, a solicitor signed a piece of paper that gave her LPA over his finances, his property, health and welfare, and the power to completely remove his daughter Carolyn from his life altogether. After having no contact for years, suffering from emotional distress, accusations of abuse and harassment, and no knowledge of where her father lived, Carolyn finally had a breakthrough. In December 2022, she found him on the electoral roll in a care home. The visiting log showed that her father was left alone for 346 days in the year 2022, without any visitors, not even on his birthday. Even after she found her father, the ordeal continued for several months. Eventually, the authorities acted, and Carolyn was able to spend the last 6 months of her father's life by his side. Another victim, Madam Deputy Speaker, a victim survivor, is Anne Berry. Anne, without discussion or notice, was removed from both her partner's LPAs because of the Office of the Public Guardian had received 2 partial deeds of revocation, owing to apparently signed by him. However, for at least the previous year, owing to Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia, he'd been unable to even sign a cheque. This was reported to the Office of the Public Guardian, where Anne was denied access to a screenshot of her partner's signature to verify. For 2 years, the Office of the Public Guardian was unhelpful and consistently slow to respond to Anne. Her testimony shows how these protective bodies often prove to be toothless to those who need them most. Another case is the story of Sarita McLachlan, who has sadly not had the same resolution. Within 2 months of her mother being placed in a care home, her brother stopped Sarita and other family members from taking her out for social and leisure activities. For 5 months later, he banned them from seeing her altogether, and the care home accepted his instructions as he had an LPA. Her brother claims she was distressing their mother by trying to make her discuss financial affairs and that she no longer wanted to see her. 9 years later, Madam Deputy Speaker, Sarita's nightmare continues with no explanation given as to why certain family members cannot visit, other than alleging it is her wish. And finally, on the case histories, I come to my constituent, Juliet Hurst. Juliet's mother was proposed to by a man after having been in a relationship for just 17 days. Over the following 20 years, Juliet's mother was coerced into only being allowed to speak on the phone if it was on loudspeaker, not being permitted to attend appointments alone, and not even being allowed to decide which clothes she could buy or even wear. This culminated in the inheritance from her mother's late sister being transferred into a joint account and then into an ISA in only his name. He spent it all on new cars, on a much more expensive house, far away from the rest of the family. And then Juliet's mother received a terminal diagnosis. At her mother's request, Juliet and her family arranged for a solicitor to visit to get her mum's affairs in order. However, the husband wouldn't allow this visit without him being present. He stopped feeding her, he stopped bathing her, and he wouldn't even help her to get to the toilet. When Juliet's mother lay dying in St Gemma's Hospice in my constituency, the husband bought another new car for £12,500 and transferred £50,000 into his bank account from their joint account whilst she was bedbound. Almost as soon as Juliet's mother had died, the husband immediately moved a new woman into their flat, dumping Juliet's mother's possessions outside in a bin liner. Juliet wrote to me and said, "It is a repeating pattern of behaviour, and there needs to be more help out there, especially for the families of these victims. Banks can't talk to family members if they don't have a power of attorney, but coercive controllers don't allow any family members to get that power of attorney as they want full control. There needs to be change with banks, otherwise there's no way of protecting the victims." Madam Deputy Speaker, she is absolutely right. I've also been made aware of shocking cases involving a lodger getting an LPA over their landlord, providing that individual with access to thousands in savings and the ability to remortgage, or even a man who could not sign his own name, whose LPA was signed away using just a fingerprint. Whilst the scale of this abuse is already alarming, and the simplification of obtaining lasting power of attorney is proving to be fueling the fire, I'm sure there are more as yet unknown victim survivors. But this bill is focused on prevention, removing the incentive for unscrupulous individuals to take advantage of vulnerable older people. Madam Deputy Speaker, between 2019 and 2024, 1,066 cases were received by the Hourglass Helpline, where victim survivors had power of attorney. Between the same dates, casework interactions where powers of attorney were mentioned totalled 3,436. 2,251 of these were related to economic abuse. Of the 7,973 risk-assessed safeguarding concerns raised in the years 2022 to 2023, 7,175, or 90%, resulted in no action by the Office of the Public Guardian. Madam Deputy Speaker, the family court data shows that over 50% of donors are over 75 years old at the point of registration of their LPA. That's over 4.5 million people since 2008 who were over 75 when they registered their LPA and are vulnerable to this type of abuse. My bill is therefore calling for the implementation of government-regulated safeguarding procedures for all banks over the way they deal with LPAs and the accounts of donors. This would include contacting the donor or a GP before an LPA is activated and monitoring spending prior to and after the LPA is activated. There must be new powers for the relevant authorities to hold the Office of the Public Guardian to account on dealing with potential cases of abuse, including oversight of freezing orders, which are rarely, if ever, used. Immediate freezing orders should be used for those under investigation, so they cannot pay their own legal fees with the donor's funds, which has happened on many occasions. The Office of the Public Guardian needs to remove its financial sustainability statement in favour of the safeguarding of vulnerable people. There should be more effort to publicise the OPG 100, which enables the public to find out whether someone has a lasting power of attorney. This should include the introduction of online notices after the signing of an LPA and before the registration of such an agreement. Care homes also have a duty to protect new residents who lack capacity where an attorney produces power of attorney. A care home or other provider should have an obligation to update the register with the Office of the Public Guardian. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to Andrew Bishop of Rothley Law for the help he's given me in this campaign, as well as the 4 courageous people whose cases I've mentioned today. The abuse I've described is clearly widespread. Cases from up and down the country are becoming more evident every day. I believe it's time we acted to prevent such appalling injustice, and I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Bambos Karalambus, Mark Sewards, Paula Barker, Leila Moran, Tim Rocker, Chris Law, Alex Sobel, Yuan Yang, Andrew George, and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Fabian Hamilton.
Powers of Attorney Bill.
Second reading what day?
17th of January 2025.
17th of January 2025.